Welcome, everyone. You're watching Passion Project, and I'm your host, Kat Margulis. And on today's show, we have author Amy Jones. She's the author of 3 critically acclaimed books, including We're All in This Together, Every Little Piece of Me, and the short story collection, What Boys Like. Amy also teaches creative writing and is a mentor with Flying Books in Toronto. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, so nice to see you again.
Yes.
Welcome. So I've been reading Every Little Piece of Me, and I was just so giddy when I dove in. I was just like, yes, this is amazing. I'm like just loving it. And it was so punk rock. And what I found, like just doing a little bit of digging with your other books, was I'm seeing recurring themes of family, celebrity, and identity. And, characters that are struggling with some or all of these. And I was wondering, what inspires you to write these stories, or where did they come from?
I think they all sort of come from different places, but they all encompass different aspects of my life. So when I wrote We're All in This Together, it's sort of like a family drama comedy, I suppose. And it deals with a lot of like issues about dysfunctional families, about sort of that whole push-pull of like staying home or like branching out into the world. And then, who cares for whom. And that was like a very personal story for me when I wrote it. And I loved doing it, but I did a lot of interviews where, a lot of like, personal stuff would come up in the interviews, and which I don't mind. I'm very much an open book, but when I went to write Every Little Piece of Me, I thought I want to write something that is so far removed from my own life that I can actually sort of, avoid talking about that for a little while. And, I've always sort of been obsessed with celebrity culture, as I know a lot of us are. And, I grew up in Halifax, sort of when there was a big, like indie music boom, like back in the 90s.
That.
And I was, I grew up going to like all ages gigs and wishing that I was in a band, and never really having the like gumption to go and do it, and to just sort of, walk up to one of those like cool indie rocker boys and be like, I want to sing in your band. So I was like, okay, maybe, I'll try writing about that, because most of the time when I write, it's, ever since I started writing, I've done it just so I can imagine different lives that I haven't lived. So that's sort of where that whole idea came from. And then, I also watch a lot of reality television, and I'm really fascinated by how it works, and how, we're sort of given this illusion of reality through what we see on the screen. So I thought that those two, having a character coming from each of those different worlds, would be a really interesting sort of dynamic to explore.
Yeah, and you write about it, especially the musician. I was like, she's got to be a musician. But it also, the reality TV part of it, I like totally flipped it on its head for because we kind of look at it a certain way as consumers, and seeing the other side of what it would be like to be in the machine, it was really eye-opening and interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm constantly I think it's just my writer's brain. Like, even when I'm just trying to relax and watch television, I'm constantly picking it apart in my head. So, every time I watch a lot of reality competition shows. That's kind of my jam. So I watch Drag Race, I watch MasterChef, I watch all of those. And I love the way that they sort of put them together to form a narrative about the people who are appearing on the shows. And so I started thinking about how that works, and actually realizing, a lot of times the things that we see on the screen are edited in a certain way to sort of, give us certain ideas about the characters. So I started thinking about, so in Every Little Piece of Me, as you know, the reality show is sort of a fly on the wall kind of show about a family that moves from New York to a small town in Nova Scotia to run a bed and breakfast. And the two dads of the family are, sort of semi-famous actors. They have a bit of celebrity, and they have their 3 adopted children. And the eldest, Ava, is a very reluctant participant in this. She doesn't want to be a part of it. So I thought that would be an interesting mesh with Megs, who is sort of the musician character, because, she wants it so badly.
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the fame part, but like music is her life, and it's sort of saved her life at one point. So to sort of have those two things come together, where like Mags wants to, the thing that she wants to do necessarily puts her into this like sphere of fame, whereas Ava doesn't want to be famous. But then all of a sudden, when her sister is the one who becomes more famous on the show, she finds herself being jealous and realizing that maybe, you know, there is part of it that she wants. So yeah, I sort of I thought it would be interesting to sort of bring those two together and see how sort of the way that they construct in, you know, they put people together in a reality show just to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I'm going to jump around because I had this question down later, but I'm curious, like, music plays such a big part of this story. Do you listen to music while you write? Like, is that normal, or do you just with this book, or like, yeah, how does music impact your writing?
I'm a huge music fan. I'm not musical at all, except for like occasional karaoke nights. But I've always been like a huge music fan, and I find that like I can't really listen. I listen to music while I write, but it has to have no lyrics. Like I can't listen to anything with lyrics while I write. But I actually listen to it a lot. Because I like to think of this as part of my writing process, but I walk a lot and or even just drive, or I'll drive around and I'll put music on. And so each of my books actually has a playlist that's sort of attached to it of songs that sort of would put me in the mood for writing it or would give me ideas about writing it. I also find that I get really inspired going to see live shows, which is why this, you know, past year and a half has been so difficult, because I really love going to live shows. And I find just the act of like being in a room with other people who are appreciating the same music that you are, and just like having nothing else to do, right? Like if you're listening to music at home, it's so easy to get distracted by other things. You know, you have it on while you're cooking, or, you know, you're looking at your phone or whatever it might be. But when you're in, you know, a bar or a stadium or whatever it might be, watching a performance, that's all you're doing. And it's such a different experience. And I find that it taps into this, like some part of my brain that allows me to sort of, I don't know, just I find it really inspiring, and it sort of allows me to, you know, think about, because I always find like my thoughts wandering, and I always end up like thinking, oh, wouldn't this be a great idea? Or maybe I can work this in, or like, just, you know, feeling that sort of interplay between what I'm seeing and like what I'm working on myself.
Yeah. And I never thought of it that way, but I just love how you put that out there, that you are like, when you see a show, that you are super present. It's something that, you know, I really work on with my mindfulness practice every day. It's so hard to be present, but that's the moment that it's just like instant here now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm constantly like searching out those kind of opportunities where, you know, I am sort of just in the moment, because I have the same thing. Like I feel myself, especially, you know, like I was saying, my writer's brain, I'm always analyzing things. Even like, I mean, I like obviously read a lot. But even sometimes while I'm reading, I find myself, you know, thinking, oh, how do they do this? And like, oh, this is a really cool scene. How could I do something similar?
Yeah.
So it's hard to turn off. So I'm constantly seeking out those experiences where I can just sort of turn it off and be in the moment.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's like, was that something that you developed over time? Like, that's just something that I took a writing course, I think it was last summer, where they recommended like reading a book, but reading it as like picking it apart brain, right? Not as a reader brain. And it's like, oh, I have moments where I'm like, oh, that was really cool that they did that, but I don't normally go there. So was that something you've honed?
Yeah, I think so. And like I tell my students this all the time, because I give them the same advice, is that, you know, reading is really the best way to learn to write. But I also warn them that it can also sort of ruin something that you love in a way. I tend to try to read things that are really outside my genre. And like I read a lot of mystery novels, for instance, because I find that those are the type of books that I can just get lost in, because I'm not trying to do what they're doing. But yeah, I think it is one of those things that like, I don't think that you just know how to do that. I think it's something that, you know, the more that you study the craft of writing, and the more that you sort of start thinking about how stories work, and, you know, how characters are developed and how worlds are built, you're constantly looking for those connections in everything all the time. And it can get very exhausting. But I mean, it is really the best teacher, I think. Like, it's the best way to sort of learn how to do it is, seeing how people who you admire do it and try to sort of analyze what they're doing to get an effect on you. Like that's
Yeah.
really what it is, right? Like they're putting together words on a page that are having some kind of emotional effect on you. And sometimes it feels like just magic, really. Like even after all these years of doing it, sometimes I read it and I'm like, I don't know how they how they did that.
That's cool too. That's
Yeah.
cool too. Now you had like crazy awesome success. It seems from the get-go. Your debut novel, in this together, was a national bestseller. It won the Northern Lit Award and was a finalist for the 2017 Leacock Medal for Humor. Your short story collection was also, really well received. What was it like to debut like that? And what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I mean, I know it does seem like it was sort of, a very exciting debut, but I mean, it was a lot of years of work in the making, as I'm sure most people will tell you. And this is another thing that I'm constantly telling my students, because I think that they think if they don't sit down and write something perfect the first time or get published the first time or, have that kind of success right away, then they're not good at what they do. And I was taught, like, writing is like anything else. You develop your skills as you go on. And so, I mean, when I first started writing, I was terrible, as everybody is, I think, because I hadn't quite learned how to build stories yet. And so I ended up doing an MFA program through the University of British Columbia, and that's where What Boys Like came out of that. So I wrote a bunch of stories, and I ended up putting them together as a book. But then there was like 7 or 8 years between that and the novel where, I thought, like, the short stories came out and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm a published author. This is my dream. Now I can, I'll never have to work at the mall again. That success is mine to take. And it doesn't work that way. And it does. I mean, obviously for some people it does. But I think it's also, hugely dependent on luck and timing, sort of depending on what you're interested in writing, who's looking for what out there, what readers are tapped into in the moment. Like that's something that is, nobody can predict what people are going to want to read. So, there was a bunch of years in between there where, I decided, okay, I'm going to pivot from writing short stories to a novel, because I always really wanted to try it. But it seemed so daunting, but I thought, I'll just give it a go. And I wrote a novel and it was not good. and luckily my agent was like, let's just put this aside for now and maybe you can work on something else. And that's sort of when I started writing We're All in This Together. I was living in Thunder Bay at the time, and I really wanted to write about it there, because there's not a lot of books that are set in Thunder Bay, and it's such a beautiful and kind of mysterious place for a lot of people. So I wrote We're All in This Together, and I was really, really lucky to get to have it picked up by McClellan and Stewart, and to get to work with my amazing editor, who just sort of, she could see, I mean, what she read when I first submitted that manuscript to her, like, I don't know how she saw the potential in it, but she saw something in it and she's like, I can work with this. And she really guided me towards making that book what it was, because she could really see, like, further down the road what it could be. And so I was so happy to have her support and my publisher's support. And I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is if you have good people working in your corner who believe in you, and that's what's going to lead you to have success. I mean, people think that writing is a very solitary thing, which it is in some respects. Yeah. Like, we spend a lot of time by ourselves, but having a book come out in the world takes a whole slew of people, and so you want to have people in your corner who really believe in what you're doing and who can see what it is that you want to do.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And so when you went and you sent your book to an agent, she loved it. And then she shopped around, and, the editor loved it. So did you feel like it was 100%? Like, did you get to the point where, like, I don't know what else to do with it? And, like, what was the feeling before you go, like,
yeah, I mean, it's quite an intense experience, being like, getting any sort of feedback or being edited. just because, like, for one thing, you are sitting there having a conversation about stuff that you've made up in your head and people that don't exist and like what their motivations are. So it's kind of funny to sort of be like, okay, well, this is something that I've created and somebody else is interested in, sort of seeing it through. And when they really sort of get what you're doing, whether it could an editor or an agent or, even someone, a teacher or a mentor or someone in your writing group or anything, when you find that person who really is like, okay, I know what you're trying to do, that's the real, like, such a gift because it can be really hard to find. And it can, you can get a lot of advice where, people talk a lot about in the writing world about sort of the MFA story or like story by consensus, where like you do a workshop and everybody sort of gives you their opinion, and like the resulting story is something that's a little bit of everything, and it ends up being a little bit bland because it doesn't have anybody's like real vision. It's just kind of it appeals to sort of the median the median reader, and I think that can be valuable in some, like, workshops are definitely valuable. And, I've run them before in my courses. And I think really the value in that is sort of learning how to deliver feedback as opposed to, and also how to receive it. Those are two skills that I think are downplayed in writing courses, because, that is such a huge part of being a writer. As you say, like, you sit there with someone and they're giving you feedback, and you have to not only understand what they're saying and how to implement it in your own work, but also trust yourself enough to know what's going to work for you and what isn't. So even though my editor and I see eye to eye on so many things, there are times when I'm like, you know what? No, this is not how I saw that scene, or, I think the character would do this way. And you also have to learn to like trust your own gut and really sort of take the feedback that is going to be useful for you, and not just blindly, follow what someone else is telling you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a writing group, and it's been from the get-go was a huge lesson for me in feedback and how to get it. And they were wonderful. And I was like, actually I took a course at Humber, and that's where we first met. And so that was like, in a container, where they kind of set some rules, and we kind of carried on with that afterwards. But yeah, it was just a totally different experience to feedback. And I love it now, especially when it's from the right people.
Absolutely.
And so, but you did an MFA, so you probably had an experience with a writing group, like, or do you have a writing group? Did you have a writing group, or?
I did for a bit. And, it did also come out of my MFA program. I more at this point have like people who I trust, to read things. My husband's also a writer, so we share our work with each other, which sometimes people would maybe caution against, but because he does write novels as well, and he has a really different vision of how stories are put together, but he can see things in my work that I wouldn't necessarily see. He's really good at analyzing, things like structure and world building and stuff like that. Whereas I'm much more like character focused, and I'm always like, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What's the emotional underpinning? What's driving them? What do they want? All of these things. So yeah, I do have, and I have some friends who I met in my MFA program who also read my work, but I try not to share it with too many people, just because of that. I don't want that sort of cacophony of voices, sort of telling me different things and having to, sort of unpack it all, because, I do have my editor who's like my primary person.
Yeah. And it's like, this is like, you're married now. You got your person.
Exactly. She's my person. And, it is helpful to have the outside eye before it gets to her, because I also don't want to like give her a ton of work. But I've also learned so much from her about how to deliver feedback to people. Because, I teach and I mentor, and, I end up reading a lot of manuscripts that are in really early stages. And, I'm always trying to like walk that line of being encouraging while also being able to sort of point out what needs work. And, I really believe that, I really believe that anyone can write a book. If you have the passion for it and it's something you really, really want to do, and you have the patience, because writing is really a game of patience. I think that anybody can do it. So anytime, no matter what stage of a manuscript that I see, or, whether I'm teaching beginners or, more advanced students, like, I think it's always important to deliver feedback in a way that makes them feel as though you're honoring their vision, I guess is the way I would put it. And that you're, again, are seeing what they're seeing. And so it's not a matter of saying this is good or this is bad. It's like, as a reader, this is what I'm seeing on the page. Is that what you meant for me to see? Is that what you wanted me to think about this character? Is that what you wanted me to understand from the story? And it's really about like sort of shortening that gap between the vision you have in your head of what the book is going to be and what actually ends up on paper, because it can be a totally different thing.
That is the biggest thing. Like, that was my first thing with feedback, is they just see the blind spots, and it's like, oh, that wasn't there. You didn't see that. Like, that's
because everything about your character, right? And everything about your story in your head, or you're working towards that. And so it's really easy for you to either over explain things, because you really just want the reader to know as much as you know, or under explaining because you forget that they don't know.
And I love it. Just really took me back. It's a great ride. I'm still in it though. But I love reading about, the Halifax music scene, Toronto music scene. And of course it's set in, and this is Every Little Piece of Me we're talking about, also set in New York. Choosing setting and like the location for your story, I guess, did that ever come up for you when it came to getting it out in the world? And do you think about the choices you're making on an international audience scale?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, people always say, like I shouldn't say people always say, but like I have heard that people say that, if you're going to set something in Canada, then, you may have a harder time selling it internationally, or people won't, especially American audiences won't want to read it, which I don't totally believe. I think, I've read lots of books set in places that I've never even heard of. And I love that. I love learning about them. And that's, that's sort of one of the joys of reading, is discovering a new place. So if you do a good job, sort of, rendering a place onto the page and making it feel real for someone who's never been there, then I think that, you can set a book anywhere you want. That said, my short stories specifically were mostly set in Halifax, because that's where I was living at the time, and it was what I knew. I hadn't left home at this point, so I was still, sort of feeling things out. And you always hear that adage, like, write what you know, which is good advice, but also you want to always sort of expand from that as well. And a lot of the feedback that when that book came out, a lot of the feedback I received, especially from people from Nova Scotia, was that, they were so happy to read about their own experience and see it on the page, which, for a place like Halifax, doesn't happen that often. It happens more now. Like, Halifax is a really great literary scene. It's expanded so much in the last, little while. But, when I was first starting out, like, all the books that were about Nova Scotia were probably going to be set in like a rural area. They were going to be in Cape Breton, or they were going to be about fishermen, or, that wasn't my experience. I grew up in a city. I grew up in Halifax. My whole experience, to me, was very urban. And so, I sort of wanted that to be reflected on the page. And I think, that part of it was really important to me at the time. And then, when I wrote We're All in This Together, same thing. Like, I was living in Thunder Bay, and I really was so fascinated by it. And I thought, this is such a great setting for, and a lot of the themes that I'm interested in exploring, family, and, sort of that whole idea of, like, having to leave where you're from, and the guilt that's associated with that sometimes, especially if if you have a family that's very grounded. And I found in Thunder Bay, like, there was a lot of people who their families were rooted there and had been for generations. And it actually, there was a bit of a stigma attached to, like, if you leave, you're not sticking it out, or you're not it's like, yeah, it's just like that whole like guilt thing of,
Mhm.
you never call, you never visit, all that stuff. So yeah, I think, even though I was interested, I was like, I really want to set something here because I think it's a really beautiful place and has a lot of interesting aspects to it. It also has to fit the themes of what you want to write about.
Mhm.
And so when I wrote Every Little Piece of Me, again, because, I was writing about, about music, and, my whole like musical upbringing had been in Halifax, and it just sort of seemed like a natural fit for me, to set it there. And I just felt like I wasn't finished writing about Nova Scotia yet. But
Mhm.
I did decide, so the town where the bed and breakfast is, that the reality show is set in, it's based on a real town, but I fictionalized it. So there is no Gin Harbor in real life. I made it up, because I do find that like when you fictionalize a place, you have a little bit more freedom to do what you
Yeah.
want. Yeah, because sometimes if you're writing about a real place and you either like purposefully or unintentionally, get something wrong, people will point it out.
Yeah, and I don't know. There's with the first book I did set it, but this one I'm like I really don't want to tell you where this is.
Yeah.
I'm like I don't know if the reader will like that, but I'm really kind of like we'll see what everybody else says. But I just there's also kind of this idea of like writing in no place, no time, like
Yeah.
that freedom, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I think even if you set it somewhere, like I'm working on a book now that's set in Florida, and it's actually set in a like it's sort of the same thing where it's a community that, I wanted to write about a community like it.
Yeah.
So I made it up. It's not in a real place, but there are some characteristics that are similar to, where my parents live. So
Hmm.
I yeah, but I think, for me it was just more important to have that freedom to be like, okay, if I want to have, the beach on this side of town as opposed to
Yeah.
this side of town.
Yeah. And yeah, which kind of brings me to, and now I'm like, why did they bring me here? I don't know why it brought me here, but I'm here. Is the scalability? How much, like, now that you're in the business, right? You're an established author and all of that. Like, how much does saleability, marketability, um, that factor into your decision on like what stories to chase? When you get these story ideas and how you develop them.
I think about it a lot. I do, yeah.
That.
Absolutely. I'm not one of these like people who's like art must exist for art's sake. I'm like, no, I wanna sell books, and but it's not just that I want to sell books, it's that I want to reach readers. That's really
Yeah.
what it is. Like that's what I'm doing this for. Like my favorite part of writing books is getting to go out there once they're out in the world and like talk to people about them and meet people and meet readers, and hearing that something resonated with them. We're All in This Together features a character, like the mother character, is suffering from dementia, and it sort of mirrors my own experience with my mom. And so getting out there, and I did say that like after a while I got a little tired of talking about it, but honestly it was really so wonderful to sort of get out there and to hear people say that like it validated their own experiences, and that it actually sort of really resonated with them. So I mean that's really my favorite part, and like you can't do that if your book doesn't sell well.
Yeah.
And I think there is more of a correlation between, I mean, I know that like I feel like if you write specifically for a market and you say, okay, this is hot right now, so this is what I'm going to write, it's not going to work because readers are smart and they're going to be able to tell that your heart isn't in it. And so I think it's important to find like sort of a crossroads there where you find something that is going to appeal to people, or it's going to resonate with readers, and which translates into sales, or but also it has to be something that you really want to do and that you love. And like I see a lot of people, like a lot of my students want to write YA because they think that YA is
Mhm.
really hot right now, and I'm like, well, do you read YA? Like if you don't read it and you don't understand, like people who like YA readers are some of the smartest and most considerate readers out there, and like if you're just buying into, or like sort of writing into tropes and not really,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you really care about, then they're going to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I now I'm even going into the movies, but just like, yeah. And it's like, as far as like one up, like, yes, they're very smart. And it just like, and you have to know that genre so well so that you can like beat them to all the punches, right? And
Exactly,
surprise
exactly.
them. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, so you're a mentor at Flying Books and you also teach creative writing. Tell me a little bit about those and yeah, what you're up to there.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought that I was going to be a teacher. um, and I started. I actually taught originally when I was in Thunder Bay. I taught at Lakehead University. I taught creative writing there, and that was sort of my first foray into teaching, and it was really terrifying. Um, and then since I've been in Toronto, I've been teaching at University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies, and I actually really love it because I love teaching adults. Not that university age people are not adults, but I love teaching people who genuinely have, most of my students have other careers,
Mm.
or they've either have other careers or they're just sort of trying to figure out what they want to do, and they're coming to it because they love it and they're interested in learning more about writing, and it may not even necessarily translate into them becoming writers or even writing a book or a story or anything like that, but like sort of learning some of those skills that we were talking about earlier about like how to like read and analyze things, and how to tell a story, because I think storytelling is useful in really any field that you're in.
Yeah.
And so, I really love seeing, and I just find that like, I get to read so much work from people from just like the most vastly diverse backgrounds and, perspectives. So I find that like super interesting, to just sort of, get away from that, because I feel like as writers we can tend to get in like a bit of a writerly bubble where
Yeah.
we only interact with other writers, and we only sort of have the perspective of other writers. So like having discussions with students who have different backgrounds and are from different places, it really sort of opens your eyes and you're like, oh yeah, there is a whole other world out there of people with different experiences and different perspectives. So that part of it I really, really love. I don't love so much the idea that I'm an authority on anything. um, just because I think we're all just sort of fumbling through this the best we
Yeah.
can, and so I think that's in part why I find the mentoring so rewarding, because it is really a one-on-one relationship where someone's trusting me with a book that they've written, or a book that they're working on, and I try to emulate my own mentors and my editor and stuff like that in the way that I sort of guide them to, not only to write to make their book better, but also to sort of understand the principles of how it all goes together, and to sort of encourage them in terms of the wider literary world as well, because I can't even imagine, like I try to think back to when I was first starting out, and like everything seems so overwhelming. How do you even start? How do you get an agent? How do you get published? There's such a like mystery that surrounds so much of the industry. And so I really try to sort of unveil that a little bit for people and help them understand how that all works, because it's one thing to like be in a class with someone or to get feedback from a teacher, and then that's it. You have your manuscript and then you're like, what do I do now? And then you're sort of set adrift. So I feel like the mentorship experience for like with me is like the full package all the way to the end.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that you shared with the teaching that you have like a lot of older students or people who, have traveled different paths to get there. Like, what do you see as, any common challenges or things that you have to address with that particular group or coach them on?
It's a lot of confidence, really. A lot of times people think that they don't have anything to say, or why would anyone want to read what I have to say? And another part of it is just prioritizing it, and like it's really prioritizing yourself in a way. Have a lot of times I see people who maybe were interested in writing when they were younger but never thought of it as a viable career, and really they're probably right. I mean, honestly, I would never want to discourage someone from pursuing that, but I think that people should know how difficult it is, and what the challenges are. But so people, they started in life, they're interested in writing, they think, okay, that's not really something that I'm going to pursue for a living, and they end up, going into whatever career that they go into, but then they sort of have it in the back of their mind all the time that like, I could do this. And really the only thing that stops you from writing is yourself. Anyone can do it. If you have a pen and a paper or a computer or whatever it might be, that doesn't require any, sort of fancy equipment the way, say like filmmaking or like music or anything like that. It's just your brain. And that can be even more intimidating for people in some respects. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and like literally like, and you can self-publish, you know what I mean? Like there's really
exactly
nothing except for yourself, which is
huge.
Exactly.
And I mean, that is, I think, one of the things that stops people the most, because it is really just you and your thoughts. And, so a lot of time, especially like my older students who have families, who have careers, who have other obligations, being able to say, okay, I'm going to take an hour a day away from all of those other things to write and prioritize that every single day is really tough. And then, especially if, when you're first starting, you're just writing garbage, which like I encourage people to do, because that's how you get to the good stuff, And so I feel like if there's one thing that I can get across to any student really, but especially those students who are struggling with, legitimizing it for themselves and sort of giving themselves permission to write, is that, everybody starts there, like everybody. And no matter like if you're the most successful author in the world or, whatever, you start with that blank page and that like huge ball of self-doubt inside of you, and you write garbage, and then the garbage gets a little bit better and a little bit better the more you go on. And eventually, if you stick it out long enough, you maybe have something that people are going to want to read. But you're never going to get there if you don't take those baby steps. Yeah.
I know. I always think about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. I'm like, 10,000 hours.
That's a really good one to remember.
Proven equation.
Yeah. That's a good one to remember.
So I almost forgot I was going to get to this, but you worked with Ashley Audrain. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing her name right. Her book, The Push, which was like a huge success. But you got to see it, you were one of the first people to see it. What was it like, what was the experience like working with her or seeing that manuscript for the first time or seeing something like that, even with your other mentor students?
It was super exciting because it was like the Flying Books has been around for a while. They're sort of a bookstore and a writing school in Toronto, but they had just launched their mentorship program, and like it was brand new. And so this was like I think one of the first in the program, but definitely my first experience. And I'd done mentoring through U of T and like in different other sort of areas, but not yet through Flying Books. So when I had no idea what to expect, but I definitely wasn't expecting what I saw, and I was like, this is really something special. And I think at that point, Ashley, she'd worked in the industry, and she had written this book, and I think she just really needed an outside eye on it to tell her, or someone who could read it and say, this is ready. And this is something that, that just to give her that encouragement, and also, just a professional who could say, this is at the point where, you should be sending it out to agents and publishers. There was a few things we talked about, structurally, but I mean, she had it like it was so polished. And, I've had a few since then that have sort of been in the same vein that, we're sort of working on still. But, I've been really, really excited and impressed with the whole process, because, I get to work with these people who are, really dedicated, and who for the most part, have already written a novel, which is like the hardest. Like getting to that point is, it's very different than, sort of teaching someone who is just coming into writing and, sort of just starting out in an intro to creative writing class. Like these are people who have done the work and put in those 10,000 hours or whatever it might be. And so, it's been really exciting to see that work develop, and to be able to help guide people
Right.
to make it better, or to, polish it up, or to, give them guidance in the industry and sort of tell them, give them some idea of how my process works. Because I think a lot of it is just people want to know how other writers do it. You know what I mean? They want
Yeah.
to know, am I doing this the right way? And, to which I would always say every way is the right way. If you get it done, it's the right way.
Yes.
But yeah, Ashley was so lovely to work with. She got everything I was saying clearly, and it worked out so well for her. And she's been so generous since the book came out and sort of promoting the program as well,
Yeah.
because it was, as I said, sort of in its infancy at the time. And so, it's been really great. Although I feel like there are some people who have come to the program thinking that they may have, an international bestseller just by working with me. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
But it brings up a good question, which is like when it comes to, pitching agents or hiring an agent or hiring an editor. And I mean, you kind of apply, you kind of wish an editor will pick you, but I mean, you can also hire editors. Like, what's your advice for in so much as you have a choice, what to look for or what to ask?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I think a lot of people don't think about that as much. They're just like, I just want an agent. I just want a publishing deal. And they don't think so much about what it's going to be like once you get there and you have to work with this person. So yeah, I think that it is a really good thing to consider. I always tell people, when you're looking specific, like especially for an agent, you want somebody who understands how you work and who you get along with, because they're going to be a representative in the world. They're going to be standing in for you, speaking to editors, speaking to, like international agents and stuff like that. They're going to be the ones selling your book. So you need to have someone who understands how to do that. And not to say that, like, I don't think that there's necessarily like bad agents and good agents. It's just like an agent who's bad for you or good for you. They may see your book in a different way than you do, and that's something that I think, when you first start sending out your submissions and your queries, it can feel like I'm just going to take the first thing that comes along, because you will experience a lot of rejection. Like that's just it seems like a numbers game in some ways, because like that's just part of it. Like that, I don't think I know a single writer who hasn't gone through that experience of just like, having something that they've written just repeatedly rejected. So yeah, it is important to remember that once you do get someone who comes along and says, I really want to represent you, that they are representing you, and they are sort of, they have the same vision for your career. They understand your working style. Like I'm really lucky with my agent. Like I tell him, I'm like, at this point, I'm like, I don't want to know anything. Like I just, I know people who will get their agents to send them every single rejection they get with all the feedback and everything. And obviously sometimes that can be helpful.
Yeah.
But at this point I'm like, yeah, you know what, like just, no news I will assume is bad news. And
Yeah,
then we'll just continue from there. And I mean, the same goes with editors as well. Like you want somebody who is not going to push you to do things that you're not comfortable with, or that you don't want to do, or that you don't push you in a direction that you don't see your book going in. So, before I signed my contract with my publisher, like I met with my editor, we had like a really long conversation, and I just we really clicked. And just from what she was saying, I mean, it was like an interview. Like she was interviewing me, I was interviewing her in some ways, although I probably didn't realize it at the time. But like, just seeing the way that she talked about my characters, the way that she spoke about, the themes in the book, and, sort of what she saw as places that I could expand on that, or add depth or strengthen it, as opposed to, trying to push me into a different direction, or put me into, a marketing category, for instance, that I wouldn't fit in, which can be a big thing as well. So, I think it's super important to remember that when you're out there looking for representation, or you're looking for an editor to work with, or whatever it might be, that, you're the artist, like you're the creator. And like, if like, you don't have to, sign with somebody if you're not comfortable with them, just because you want to get out there. There will be someone out there who understands what you're doing and who is excited about what you're doing as you are. And they are out there. And so, it just can be a matter of, like I said, writing is a patience game. It really is. There's so much waiting involved. And, just so much, like, it's just up and down constantly. So, you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Amy, thank you so much. Oh no, before we go, what's next? What are you working on? What's coming down?
Well, I'm working on a new novel. It should be out in summer 2022, which I'm really excited about, because I'm hoping that, by then we can do some live events.
Yeah.
I can get back out there and meet some readers. So yeah, it's called Pebble and Dove, and it's, as I said, it's set in Florida, and it is set in an abandoned aquarium.
Cool.
Yeah. So again, that's a setting that I was like, I really, wanted to set it there. So I was like, what's the story? What's it going to be? So that should be coming out soon. And I just keep working forward.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to see that and finish reading the book, because I'm really, really loving it. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been really great chatting.
Me. This has been a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you soon. Bye.